I made 2 different book covers for my Clash of Goddesses trilogy box set. One of them I've already shown off, and it's what I'm using on Amazon, but surprise, I made a second one. So here are the time lapses for both covers with some commentary and some of the AI generated artwork from Midjourney, which can be found in the box set. For a while I debated on what my box set cover should look like. I did some research by looking at box sets in my genre, and there was a wide variety of ways to present a box set. First, you have the traditional box set, as you see here, where it looks like an actual box with the books from the series placed into the box. In this next example, it's just a picture of all the books in the series lined up together with the first book in the front. When I saw that, I knew that that might be an easy way of putting my box set together quickly. These next 2 examples lay out all the books in this series, and it's set up on a background almost like a movie poster, and it seems really stylized to do it this way. And I was a bit excited of maybe trying this out. But I guess I really wanted a 3D image of what a box set would look like, so then I had to decide on what the cover would be. Some examples just smooshed the original book covers together to line up side by side, but I knew that wasn't what I wanted. When I decided to make a book cover, I had the immediate idea to take the elements from the 3 book covers and combine them, so that's what I did. I knew I wanted to include the main flower for each of the sisters, which was the biggest flower in the bottom right corner of each book cover. I love the rose the best of all the flowers, so I want to leave that flower head in place and take the Carrie Lily and Marigold and put those together in the opposite corner. After that, I brought in other elements from the 3 book covers: leaves, stems, other flowers. I didn't add any new elements, although I manipulated some to integrate into the new cover. I also had to include the 3 bird feathers, the peacock, raven, and eagle. After that, I had to add the lettering for the book series name, Clash of Goddesses. After getting the title set with the bevel and the drop shadow, then I looked at the overall picture and moved some of the elements around to make it look the best, especially around the lettering. Next, I added my author name and again looked at all the visual elements and made sure that it all looked good together. Once everything was in place, the flowers, feathers, and lettering, I manipulated the saturation and the temperature so that the colors weren't too bright and matched the original book covers. When I finished that, the Carrie Lily didn't look quite right, and when viewing it with Blood of the Lilies book cover, I noticed that it wasn't as bright white as it should be, so I manipulated the flower until getting it just right. Once the main cover was set, I moved to creating the 3D image. I got the base files for the 3D image from Cover Vault, a recommendation by Martin Lejeune. If I was using Photoshop, this would have been way easier to create with using smart objects, but I used the free program Gimp. I found a YouTube video that explained how to use the PSD files meant for smart objects and do a workaround in Gimp. Not a very straightforward process, but I finally got the hang of it and started to create the 3D image. For the spine of the books, I knew I wanted to do something different than I had on my original books by adding the book cover for each book at the top of the spine and putting the number of the book at the bottom. So this took a little bit of work to make it look right and line it all up with the book spines with each other. But I like how it turned out. As a reminder, I have no training in graphic design, and this is not a job I've ever had. So everything I've done here is by trial and error and watching YouTube videos to see what others have done. However, in the end, I am very pleased with the final product. It might not be perfect, but it's perfect for what I wanted to accomplish. And best of all, it's all my hard work and costs no money to get it done, which was the goal with my box set since I'm still about $4,000 in debt for the publishing and marketing for this entire series. That 3D box set ended up being the image I used on Amazon for my series. However, I was still interested in possibly making some of these other different types of examples, especially the one that looked like kind of a poster, like these ones here. So I decided to see what I could make, and I could still use the Clash of Goddesses book cover or elements of it to use in the poster format. First, I went to Derek Murphy's do-it-yourself book covers to get the 3D image of my 3 books in the trilogy done up in an ebook format. I had to upload each ebook cover as a separate file and download all the PNGs to get that transparent background, and then make sure I save those new 3D images to the right folder to find it later for working on Gimp. Next, I found my original file for Gimp that I used for my Clash of Goddesses ebook cover and opened that and made a copy of it to work on the poster layout. I referred back to the 3 examples I pulled up just to kind of get inspiration for how I would want to set up my layout. The first element I decided to keep from the original Clash of Goddesses book cover was the green watercolor background. Although I did feel that I didn't want it to look exactly the same, I want it to be maybe a little more muted to bring out the elements more, and I kind of got this idea from looking back at my examples. All of the examples seem to be drawing the eye inward toward the center. 2 of them actually have a circle in the center, and 2 of them have some extra coloring around the edges. So this is what I played with. I played with bringing forward the original graphic that was in the center of all of my covers. Later on, I will play around with darkening up the edges. Next, I had the feeling that I kind of wanted to keep all the elements in the 4 corners, but I knew that they needed to be much smaller. I already had the flower elements in the corners as just one layer, which already had the saturation and the temperature manipulated to what it needed to be. So I knew that I'd just have to work with that one layer and duplicate it a few times, and then resize each of those new layers to include only each of the 4 corners, and then of course scale down those 4 pictures. I looked back again at those 3 examples for a feel to see if I was on the right path of what I wanted to do. And when I felt satisfied with where I was at, I went ahead and then brought in all 3 of the ebook 3D pictures of my 3 books. Once getting all the pictures in, I realized that my flower elements in the corners were still just a bit too big, so I resized them. Now it's time to figure out the layout and format of my 3 book covers. I looked back several times to the examples, and I did notice that only one of them had 3 books, and I kind of liked the arrangement, so I thought to mimic the same thing. Next, I added in my author name, and I didn't really like it, but I put that aside right now to work on darkening up those edges. At first, I wasn't sure how I was going to do this, if I was going to add a new layer or work with the layers I already had. So it took a little bit of going back and forth and figuring out what I wanted to do, but it finally started looking really good, and I was really happy with this. While you watch this for the next few seconds, I am going to include some of the pictures that came from Midjourney, the AI program that creates artwork from text prompts, and which appear in my box set. So my author name that I added was the way it appears on my books, and I decided I didn't like the way it looked. And of course, this is with all the drop shadow and beveling and all that to the lettering. And the thing I probably didn't like was the drop shadow being green. It just didn't look as good from the book covers to this because of the muted background. But in order for me not to have to redo my full name and the Clash of Goddesses title, I knew that I just needed the text layer from my other files. So I opened up my original Blood of the Lily book cover and grabbed that layer to pull into this one so that I had just the text itself without all the extra stuff added on. I did play around with adding a new drop shadow, but in the color of black, to my author name, and then I pulled in the text for the Clash of Goddesses title, and I resized those words to complement the overall picture. Throughout this process, I did zoom out sometimes so that I could see what it would look like. This is especially important for when your book cover may appear as just like a little thumbnail on the vendor's site. When I thought I was done and had all the elements in place for my new book cover, I zoomed out and looked at it, and it felt like it wasn't quite right. I looked back at the examples again, and I decided I probably needed something at the bottom of my cover. And one thing I had thought of before I even started this was including the subtitle, which just simply says the complete series. Okay, at this point I thought I was done, and I flipped back and forth between my new ebook cover and the examples, and I thought it was good. So I went ahead and saved it as a PNG. But when I opened the PNG, it still felt a little empty in the background, and I was trying to figure out what could I do to make it better. And then I remembered the other graphics I had in the background. Besides the big one in the middle, I had one one at the top and one at the bottom. So I pulled those in and played around with them, and I even played around with putting a couple of them on the sides. And that completed my second ebook cover for my box set. And after saving it as a PNG, I took a look at it, and I'm pretty pleased with the way it turned out. So now you can see my 2 different covers that I made for my box set. For now, I'm just going to leave the one that I have in place right now on Amazon, which is the 3D version of an actual box set. But this one I could probably use for something else, maybe for some promotions or something. I'm not really sure, or maybe I might use it and replace the 3D box set image at some point just to see if it might maybe garner some more interest in sales. I don't know. Tell me, what are your thoughts? Which one do you like better? Tell me your favorite one by leaving a comment below. Number 1 or number 2?